Hey, welcome to the Academic Task One course. And don't tell the general students, but Academic Task One is my favourite part of the IELTS exam. Why? Well, even though there are lots of different types of charts, pie charts, bar charts, processes, maps, there is just one method we can use to answer any Task 1 question. And as a teacher, that means I can really help students maximise their score. So the aim of this course is to prepare you to answer any Task 1 question on exam day. If you are a high-level student, you might think that the lessons at the beginning of the course are rather simple. But as we build our skills, they soon become more complex. I designed this course for students who need to achieve a score between 6.5 and 9. So there is something for everyone. But before we start thinking about 8s and 9s, we need to understand the basics. And to do that, we need to know exactly what is expected of us in Academic Task 1. And rather than me telling you, which is a bit boring, why don't I show you? In Task 1 of the writing paper, you will be asked to write a report based on 1 or 2 pieces of visual information. There are many different types of visual information, so you should practice writing about all of them to be prepared on exam day. The word count for your report is important. It must be at least 150 words long. If you write less than 150 words, you will receive a lower score. There is no upper word limit. If you wanted to, you could write 500 words. However, this is a bad idea. First, the task asks you to select and summarise the main features, not every feature. Everything in your report should be relevant. The second problem? Time. You only have 60 minutes to answer Task 1 and Task 2. Task 1 is worth 1/3 of your mark, so you should take no more than 20 minutes to write it. I recommend that you write somewhere between 160 and 200 words to achieve a high score. However, how do you know how many words you have written? You could count them, but this wastes time. The best way to know your word count is to always use the official IELTS answer sheet when you practice Task 1. That way, you will know how much space 150 words of your handwriting takes on the paper. You can either download it from the IELTS website or from the link below this video. The charts, tables and diagrams used in writing Task 1 often frighten IELTS test takers. They wrongly believe that they will need to understand complicated maths in order to write the report. Don't worry, this is not true. There is absolutely no mathematics involved in the IELTS exam. All you need to write the report are some specific vocabulary terms and a few grammatical structures. More importantly, there's a recipe we can use to answer any type of Task 1 question. Once you understand the method and practice writing the answers, you should be able to answer any Task 1 question with your eyes closed. No, not actually with your eyes closed. That would have a very bad effect on your handwriting. And if the examiner cannot read your handwriting, it will also have a negative impact on your score. I just mean you will be able to do it without thinking too deeply. The key to a good Task 1 answer? Practice. If you do this, you will be happy on exam day and even happier when your results arrive. Let's start practicing now. I want you to pause the video, look at the bar chart, read the Perfect Band 9 report, and then answer the 4 questions. And I will see you when you finish. How did you get on with the questions? I don't know if that was the first time you have ever seen a Task 1 report, or if maybe you already have some experience in report writing. Either way, it's really important that we get the basics right from the beginning. So, if you remember, in the animation, I told you there is a recipe for success. Let's look at your answers to the 4 questions together to find out what that recipe is. Question number 1. Where did the writer find the information to write the introduction? I think the logical answer to this question is to say the chart. Of course, that's what we must do in our Task 1. We have to write a report based on the information in the chart. However, if you look a bit more closely, you can see that actually the introduction is just a paraphrase of the task. Let's look. The task says the chart. The introduction says the bar chart. Shows, illustrates, the amount of, how many, boys and girls, male and female school students, taking, participated in American schools, in the USA. You can see it is just a direct paraphrase. In fact, the only time the writer needed to look at the chart was to find the 3 years that the chart describes. So, step 1 in our recipe for success is writing an introduction that paraphrases the task. Notice that I said paraphrase, not copy. You must never copy the task directly into your introduction. If you do this, you will have 2 major problems. First, examiners do not count words that are copied from the task. Therefore, if you wrote 150 words and were happy at the end of your writing, when the examiner marks your report, he will remove the words from your introduction. This will mean you will have less than 150 words, and this will mean you receive a lower score. The second problem is now you don't have an introduction. And of course, that will also lower your final score because it will impact on the logical progression of your report. So, paraphrase, don't copy. We will see later in the course, it's okay to copy 1 or 2 words, but you must not copy whole phrases or the whole sentence. That's cheating, and we don't want to cheat. Let's move on to question number 2. What is the purpose of the first paragraph in the body of the report? What do you think? What information is included in this first paragraph? I think the first paragraph includes all of the key features or major trends of the chart. We call this paragraph the overview. As you will soon find out, the overview is by far the most important paragraph in your report. If you don't have one, you're in real trouble. Notice that in this paragraph, we don't have any numbers or specific details. That's not the purpose of this paragraph. This paragraph is there to give us a general picture or an overview of the chart. The overview is the second ingredient in our recipe for success. And it's also the most important ingredient. Think of it like the piece of meat in your IELTS meal. Question number 3 is really 2 questions. What information does the writer include in the final 2 paragraphs? And how does he or she organise them? Let's start with the first question. You can see after our overview, where we have the general picture of the chart, our final job is just to write about the specific details of the chart. It's in these 2 paragraphs that we must use numbers or facts to support the information. We've moved from big and general to small and detailed. However, we also need to think about how we organise these paragraphs. How did this writer organise the paragraphs? I think they did it by gender. They put all the information for girls here and all the information for boys there. But why did they start with girls? Why are girls first? Well, in this report, there were more girls than boys who studied maths. So therefore, because they are the biggest group, they're the most important group. And therefore, we should really start by discussing those first. If we had the opposite situation, if there were more boys than girls, then we might start with the boys. But you really have to organise your paragraphs, and that's another skill we will need to learn. Because maybe what's logical for me in my British brain isn't logical for you in your Chinese, Indian, Russian, Malaysian brain. We all have a different way of seeing the world. So I really need to teach you how to organise these paragraphs. My final question. How does the writer end the report? Do they have a conclusion? This question may seem very simple. It's obvious there is no conclusion at the end of this report. However, this is something that confuses students. There's a very good reason why there is no conclusion. We don't need one because we have an overview. However, I will discuss this in more detail in a later video because you really must understand the difference between an overview and a conclusion. Another very important fact is that nowhere in my report do I give a reason for the information I see in the chart. I never try to explain why more girls study advanced maths than boys. You must never give a reason or an explanation in your report. That's not your job. Your job is to describe the report, not explain the report. The best way to avoid this mistake is never use the word because. In the report, this is the most dangerous word you could think of using. But you won't because I've told you not to. If we put all this information together, we can see that our recipe for success is rather simple. First, we need an introduction that paraphrases the task but does not copy it. Second, the most important ingredient in our report, our overview, the place where we put all of the big trends, the general trends, the key features of our chart. And finally, 2 paragraphs or maybe 3 paragraphs that give the specific details of the chart. The numbers, the facts, the statistics. And if you follow this recipe for any type of chart, you will have a good chance of receiving a high score. Let's repeat what we have learned in this video. Number 1, our job for task 1 is to write a report that is at least 150 words long and takes no more than 20 minutes to write. We don't need any mathematical knowledge to write our report, but we should always follow the recipe for success. And what's the recipe? Can you remember? I just told you. An introduction that paraphrases, an overview that gives the most important information, and some paragraphs that give the specific details of the report. We never have a conclusion and we never give a reason. So for the 20 minutes you are writing your report, just delete the word because from your memory. Then reinstall it because you will need to use it in task 2. I hope now you have the beginning of a good understanding of how to write a report. Your job now is to check your understanding by going to the practice section, and I will see you in the next video where we will talk about how you can achieve the highest score possible. I'm Shelley and this is my IELTS classroom. Muesli. 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 Hey, thanks so much for watching. If you found the content useful, please click like to help the channel and don't forget to subscribe for new lessons every Friday. Plus, you can find more expert content at www.myieltsclassroom.com.